On an aircraft carrier, inspection day brings out the worst in some commanders. Admiral Wexford moves down the line, mocking the newest pilot, a woman standing silently at attention. "What's your call sign, cadet?" he asks with a smirk, expecting something to mock. The hangar bay fills with anticipatory laughter. The woman doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. Her voice cuts through the noise with perfect calm. "Maverick, sir." The Admiral's clipboard clatters to the deck. That name belongs to a legend who disappeared 3 years ago on a classified mission. A mission that the Admiral himself authorized. A mission no one was supposed to know about. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of hidden heroes and unexpected redemption, consider subscribing for more. The hangar deck of the USS Intrepid thrummed with activity, the cavernous space alive with the sounds of machinery, and the quick steps of flight crews preparing for inspection. Ensign Seren Calloway stood at the rear of the formation, her posture regulation perfect, hands clasped behind her back. Unlike the other pilots who traded nervous jokes and smoothed invisible wrinkles from their uniforms, Seren remained utterly still, observing everything through eyes that seemed to catalog rather than simply see. A faint scar traced along her jawline, the only imperfection on an otherwise flawless appearance. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight regulation bun, revealing features that seemed carved from alabaster. Beautiful, but distant, as if she were watching the world through a pane of glass. Fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floors, casting harsh shadows across faces and aircraft alike. The massive FA-18 Super Hornets loomed like sleeping predators in their berths, their sleek forms promising both protection and destruction. Seren's gaze lingered on them longer than necessary, a flash of something unreadable crossing her face. Lieutenant Commander Brax Thorne, the squadron's executive officer, moved through the ranks with practiced efficiency, straightening a ribbon here, offering a quiet word of encouragement there. When he reached Seren, he paused, taking in her perfect uniform with a critical eye. "First day's always rough, Calloway," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "The Admiral likes his traditions. Just keep your head down and let it wash over you." Seren nodded once, a precise dip of her chin that conveyed acknowledgement without revealing anything about her thoughts. "Understood, sir." Thorne studied her for a moment longer, as if trying to read something in her expression, then moved on with a slight frown. There was something about the new ensign that felt off, too controlled, too measured for someone supposedly fresh from training. Nearby, a group of pilots had gathered in a loose circle, their voices carrying across the hangar in bursts of laughter and hushed reverence. "I'm telling you," Lieutenant Archer Reeves insisted, his hands animated as he spoke. "It was the most incredible piece of flying anyone's ever seen, the Echo 5 extraction mission." The other pilots leaned in, drawn by the forbidden nature of the story. Echo 5 was classified, spoken of only in whispers and rumors. "They say Maverick flew into a no-fly zone during a typhoon," Reeves continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Pulled out 16 hostages before disappearing over the South China Sea. No mayday call, no ejection signal. Just gone." The group fell silent, the weight of lost comrades settling over them. Pilot Officer Jamila Wright crossed herself quietly. "Pentagon buried the records," Reeves added after a respectful pause. "Call sign retired. That kind of flying belongs in the history books." Across the hangar, Seren's head had turned slightly toward their conversation, though her eyes remained fixed ahead. If anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed how her hands had tightened behind her back, knuckles whitening momentarily before relaxing again. A booming voice cut through the murmurs and conversations. "Attention on deck!" The pilot snapped to attention, eyes forward, spines straight as iron rods as Admiral Harlan Wexford strode through the main doors of the hangar bay. At 62, Wexford carried himself with the uncompromising authority of a man who had earned his rank through decades of decorated service. His silver hair was cropped close to his skull, and deep lines framed eyes that missed nothing. A clipboard was clutched in one hand, and he consulted it periodically as he made his way down the line of pilots, occasionally making cutting remarks disguised as jokes that earned nervous laughter from the crew. "Peterson, still trying to grow into that uniform, I see. Martinez, your flight record is almost as spotty as your shaving technique." The pilots took it in stride, recognizing the ritual for what it was. an old-school officer testing the mettle of those under his command. The real heat came only when someone failed to measure up to Wexford's exacting standards. When he reached Seren, he paused, glancing down at his clipboard with a frown. "Calloway," he read, looking up to study her with sharp eyes. "Transfer from Pensacola. Observation status only?" His tone carried practiced condescension. "Haven't even earned your wings yet, and they put you on my carrier." Several of the pilots nearby shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared break formation. Seren remained perfectly still, her eyes focused somewhere beyond the Admiral. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice calm and uninflected. Wexford's frown deepened at her lack of reaction. He was used to nervous recruits, to stammered explanations and anxious deference. This composed stillness was unexpected. "What's your call sign, cadet?" he asked, the question deliberately demeaning. Everyone knew she was an ensign, not a cadet. Several pilots snickered. Seren didn't flinch, didn't blink. "Still waiting for one, sir," she replied. Wexford smirked, sensing an opportunity to make an example. "Let's help you out then. I'm thinking spectator, since that's all you'll be doing on my ship." More laughter rippled through the ranks. Serene's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes for just a moment. A flash of steel quickly hidden behind a mask of deference. As Wexford moved to continue his inspection, an aide hurried forward and whispered something in his ear. The Admiral's expression shifted, a momentary confusion crossing his face as he glanced back at Seren. "Calloway," he repeated, testing the name. "Why does that name sound familiar?" Before she could respond, alarms blared through the hangar bay, cutting through the tense atmosphere with their urgent wail. A voice came over the intercom, clinical and precise. "Emergency on flight deck. Fire suppression teams report immediately." The orderly formation dissolved into controlled chaos as designated emergency personnel broke ranks and ran toward the exits. Wexford turned away from Seren, barking orders and striding toward the nearest communication station. As the hangar emptied, Seren remained in place for a moment longer, her eyes following the Admiral with an unreadable expression. Then, with deliberate calm, she moved toward the flight deck access door, her path taking her in the opposite direction from where protocol dictated she should go during an emergency. No one noticed her slip away. The flight deck of the USS Intrepid blazed with afternoon sun, the heat shimmering off the tarmac in waves that distorted the air. Warning klaxons continued to sound as emergency crews raced across the deck, their movements practiced but urgent. A training jet, NFA-18F Super Hornet, was taxiing for takeoff when it suddenly veered off course, its movements erratic and unpredictable. A trail of hydraulic fluid sprayed across the deck behind it, creating a hazardous slick that forced ground crew to scatter. The aircraft lurched dangerously close to a row of fueled jets waiting for their turn to launch. From the bridge, Admiral Wexford watched the unfolding situation with tight-lipped concern, issuing rapid commands to the flight deck officer. "Get that jet shut down now," he ordered. "If that hydraulic leak ignites near the fuel lines, we'll lose half the air wing." The pilot, Lieutenant Zaria Okafor, could be heard over the comm system, her voice tense but controlled. "Control, this is Raptor 4. I've lost primary hydraulics and steering. Controls are sluggish, attempting emergency protocols." Through the chaos of responding emergency teams, a lone figure sprinted across the deck without authorization, moving with purpose toward the troubled aircraft. It took Wexford a moment to recognize Ensign Calloway, her dark hair coming loose from its bun as she ran directly into the danger zone. "Get that cadet off my flight deck now," Wexford bellowed into the comm. "She's not authorized for emergency response." But Seren was already climbing onto the wing of the aircraft, using the emergency handholds to make her way to the cockpit. Lieutenant Okafor looked up in surprise as Seren appeared beside her canopy, but quickly opened the secondary access panel that allowed limited outside communication. What followed was unlike any emergency procedure Wexford had seen in 40 years of naval aviation. Seren began communicating with Okafor through a series of hand signals, guiding her through what appeared to be a shutdown sequence that wasn't in any standard manual. Okafor followed the directions without hesitation, her hands moving across the console in precise response to Seren's signals. Within 60 seconds, the jet powered down safely, its systems going dormant in a controlled sequence rather than the emergency shutdown that would have damaged critical components. The flight deck fell momentarily silent before erupting in controlled activity again, emergency crews converging on the now safe aircraft. Wexford's face was a thundercloud as he turned to his XO. "Get Calloway to my office, now." 30 minutes later, Sarin stood at attention before Admiral Wexford's desk, her uniform once again immaculate despite her unauthorized sprint across the flight deck. The Admiral's office was a testament to a career built on discipline and achievement. Awards and commendations lined the walls, while model aircraft sat on carefully arranged shelves. A large window overlooked the flight deck, the endless horizon of ocean stretching beyond. "You violated at least 7 protocols," Wexford began without preamble, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You're here to observe, not play hero." "Yes, sir," Sarin responded evenly. "Explain yourself, Ensign." Sarin's posture remained perfect, but her eyes were direct now, meeting Wexford's without hesitation. "The hydraulic bypass valve was tampered with, sir. The standard emergency procedure would have resulted in catastrophic failure when applied to that specific malfunction." Wexford's eyes narrowed. "Tampered with? That's a serious accusation." "The valve housing showed tool marks consistent with deliberate manipulation, sir. Not something that occurs through normal wear and tear." "And how exactly would an observational cadet know about a hydraulic bypass configuration specific to the FA-18E? Wexford leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "That's specialized knowledge, Calloway. Not something they teach at basic flight school." Instead of answering directly, Sarin tilted her head slightly. "Have you reviewed the Echo 5 files recently, sir?" The question hit Wexford like a physical blow. His face paled, then flushed with anger. "Those files are sealed by direct Pentagon order. How do you even know that designation?" "Just curious, sir," Sarin replied, her face betraying nothing. "Will that be all?" Wexford stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're confined to quarters until further notice, Ensign. I want a full explanation of your background and training on my desk by 0800 tomorrow." "Yes, sir," Sarin replied, saluting crisply before turning to leave. When the door closed behind her, Wexford sank back into his chair, his mind racing. Echo 5 was one of the most classified operations in recent naval history, its very existence known only to a handful of senior officers. He pulled out his secure phone and dialed a number from memory. "This is Admiral Wexford," he said when the call connected. "I need everything on Ensign Sarin Calloway. Everything, including any connection to Echo 5 or Commander Kincaid." The voice on the other end paused. "Sir, that's a highly classified request." "I'm well aware," Wexford replied grimly. "Priority Alpha. I want those files within the hour." After ending the call, Wexford stared out at the endless ocean, a sense of unease settling over him like a physical weight. Something wasn't right about Ensign Calloway. Her knowledge, her confidence, the way she carried herself, all spoke of experience far beyond her rank and file. And that question about Echo 5, delivered with such pointed casualness, felt like more than coincidence. It felt like a message. In the officers' mess that evening, Lieutenant Archer Reeves watched as Sarin sat alone at a corner table, methodically consuming her dinner without engaging with anyone around her. The other pilots gave her a wide berth, rumors of her unconventional actions on the flight deck having spread throughout the carrier. Curiosity finally overcame caution, and Reeves collected his tray and approached her table. "Mind if I join you, Ensign?" he asked. Sarin glanced up, her expression neutral. "Free country, Lieutenant." Reeves settled across from her, studying her face with undisguised interest. "That was impressive today with Okafor's jet. Where'd you learn that shutdown sequence?" "Training," Sarin said without elaborating, her attention returning to her meal. "Funny thing," Reeves continued, undeterred by her brevity. "That sequence you used? It was developed by Maverick after the Taiwanese Strait incident. Never made it into the manuals." Sarin's fork paused halfway to her mouth, then continued its journey as if nothing had happened. "Maybe you shouldn't believe every legend you hear, Lieutenant." "The thing about legends," Reeves pressed, leaning forward, "is that they're usually based on something real. I served with Kincaid, Maverick, on the Nimitz, before Echo 5. At the mention of the mission, several nearby officers glanced over, then quickly away, as if the very name might bring bad luck. "Did you now?" Sarin's tone remained conversational, but something had changed in her posture, a subtle tensing, like a predator suddenly alert. He had this way about him, Reeves continued, watching her carefully. Could calculate fuel ratios in his head faster than the computers. Used to say the numbers just looked different to him, patterns, not figures. Seren met his eyes directly for the first time, and Reeves felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in that gaze, something old and knowing that had no place in the eyes of a rookie ensign. You shouldn't talk about classified operations in the mess hall, Lieutenant, she said quietly. Some ghosts prefer to stay buried. Before Reeves could respond, Commander Lyra Takeda approached their table, her expression professionally neutral. As the carrier's intelligence officer, Takeda moved through the ship like a shadow, collecting information and managing the flow of classified data. Ensign Calloway, she said, Admiral Wexford requests your presence in the secure briefing room at 2100 hours. Seren nodded once. I'll be there, Commander. Takeda hesitated, then added, He said to tell you he's found your file. All of it. Something flashed in Seren's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or concern, before her expression smoothed again into unreadable calm. Thank you for the message. As Takeda departed, Reeves found himself studying Seren with renewed interest. What file is that, Ensign? Seren stood, collecting her tray. Good night, Lieutenant. As she walked away, Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just brushed against something far larger and more dangerous than a simple case of mistaken identity or unauthorized knowledge. There was a ghost on the carrier, all right. But whether it was Mavericks or something else entirely remained to be seen. Wexford sat alone in the secure briefing room, the overhead lights dimmed to reduce glare on the multitude of screens that lined the walls. Various classified feeds provided real-time information from across the globe, but his attention was fixed on a single secure terminal before him. The files on Ensign Serene Calloway were sparse to the point of suspicion. Basic training records, standard psychological evaluations, a service history that showed promise but nothing extraordinary. The official record painted a picture of a competent but unremarkable officer who had somehow been fast-tracked to carrier duty despite minimal flight hours. It was what wasn't in the file that troubled Wexford most. No personal history prior to enlistment, no family contacts, no detailed educational background. Just enough information to create the outline of a person without filling in any of the substance. Computer, he commanded. Access sealed files. Authorization Wexford Alpha 79er. The screen blinked, then displayed a simple message. Access denied. Clearance insufficient. Wexford frowned. As an admiral commanding a carrier group, there were very few files he couldn't access. He tried again, using his highest emergency clearance code. Access denied. Pentagon authorization required. He sat back, the implications settling like ice in his stomach. Either Ensign Calloway was connected to something so classified that even an admiral couldn't access it, or someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide her true identity. On a hunch, Wexford switched tactics. Computer, access classified mission records, Echo 5 extraction, authorization, Wexford Alpha 79er. The screen hesitated, then displayed a heavily redacted file. Most of the information was blacked out, but images began to scroll across the screen. A pilot in full gear, call sign, Maverick, stenciled on the helmet. Mission reports with entire paragraphs redacted. A crash site in mountainous terrain, debris scattered across a rocky slope. A heavily redacted Pentagon memo with only the header visible. Project Lazarus, Phase 1. Approval. Wexford's phone rang, breaking the silence. Commander Takeda's voice was urgent on the other end. Sir, you need to see this. Ensign Calloway just accessed the flight simulator. She's running the Echo 5 extraction route perfectly. But sir, that course isn't even in our database. No one should know those coordinates. Wexford's hand tightened around the phone as he stared at the classified photo of the missing pilot. I'm on my way. And Lyra, don't let her out of your sight. The flight simulator room was dark except for the glow of screens and instrument panels, casting Seren's face in a ghostly blue light as she navigated a virtual aircraft through a mountain range shrouded in storm clouds. Her hands moved with fluid precision over the controls, anticipating changes in conditions before the simulator could generate them. Through the one-way observation glass, Wexford and Commander Takeda watched in silence, both aware they were witnessing something impossible. She's outperforming the original mission parameters, Takeda whispered, pointing to a data readout. Even Maverick didn't hit these marks. Because Maverick was flying in an actual typhoon, Wexford responded, his voice tight. Not in a simulator. On the screen, Sarin executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional training, signature moves that only one pilot was known for. The simulator's tracking system struggled to keep up, occasionally glitching as the virtual aircraft performed what should have been impossible turns and dives. Pull her file again, Wexford ordered, unable to tear his eyes from the display. Every detail. Where she trained, who signed off on her transfer, everything. Sir, Takeda replied hesitantly, I already did. There's nothing there beyond what you've seen. It's as if she didn't exist before 2 years ago. The implications of that statement hung in the air between them, too outlandish to voice aloud. On the screen, Seren brought the virtual aircraft through a narrow mountain pass at a speed that would have torn the wings off a real jet, then executed a perfect landing on a makeshift runway barely long enough to accommodate the aircraft. The simulation ended, the screens freezing on a mission completion notification. Extraction successful. All objectives achieved. Casualties, 0. Inside the simulator, Seren sat motionless for a long moment, then removed her hands from the controls and closed her eyes. In the blue glow of the screens, her expression was one of profound grief, the first genuine emotion Wexford had seen cross her face. Sir, Takeda said quietly, what are we dealing with here? Wexford didn't answer immediately. He was remembering another pilot, another time, a cocky young commander with an uncanny gift for flight and a disregard for protocol that both inspired and infuriated those around him. Commander Elias Kincaid, call sign Maverick, who had vanished 3 years ago during the ill-fated Echo 5 mission. I don't know, he finally replied, but I intend to find out. The next morning's inspection was conducted under a cloud of tension. The pilot stood at attention in the hangar bay, but whispers had spread throughout the ship. Rumors about the new ensign and her impossible knowledge, about classified missions and Pentagon secrets. Wexford moved mechanically through the ranks, his mind elsewhere. When he reached Seren, he paused, studying her with new eyes. Lieutenant Commander Okafor credits you with saving her life yesterday, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Just applied my training, sir, Seren replied, eyes forward. And where exactly were you trained, Calloway? Wexford's voice dropped, ensuring only she could hear his next words. Your file shows basic flight school, but your simulator performance last night, the Echo 5 extraction route, perfect score. That course isn't even in our database. Something shifted in Serene's composure, a microscopic tell that most would miss. But Wexford had spent decades reading people in high-pressure situations. It was recognition and perhaps a hint of relief. Before she could respond, klaxons wailed across the carrier, cutting through the tense atmosphere with urgent electronic shrieks. Incoming aircraft! The tactical officer's voice blared over the comm system. Unidentified bogey on approach vector, not responding to identification protocols. The hangar bay erupted into controlled chaos as pilots and flight crew raced to their stations. Wexford strode toward the nearest communication panel, demanding updates. Signals scrambled, the tactical officer reported. Not responding to IFF, ETA 3 minutes. Scramble the alert fighters, Wexford ordered, his mind shifting to combat readiness despite the unresolved questions about Ensign Calloway. Can't, sir, came the tense reply. All aircraft are in maintenance cycle following yesterday's hydraulic issue inspection. Nothing's ready for immediate launch. A heavy silence fell over the command staff as the implications sank in. The carrier was effectively defenseless against an approaching unidentified aircraft that refused to communicate, potentially hostile, and definitely a threat. Missile defense systems are online, the weapons officer reported. But we'd prefer not to engage unless absolutely necessary. As panic began to spread among the junior officers, Seren stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable note of authority that seemed at odds with her rank. There's one aircraft ready, sir, the X-Wing prototype on the far deck. Wexford turned to her sharply. That's an experimental aircraft. Nobody's cleared to fly it except... I am, Seren interrupted. She produced a small device from her pocket and pressed her thumb to its surface. A holographic authentication code shimmered into existence between them, a complex shifting pattern of symbols and numbers. Authorization Echo 5, she said quietly. The code, one Wexford recognized instantly as belonging to a dead man, froze everyone in place. Senior officers stared in disbelief, while junior personnel looked confused but sensed the gravity of the moment. "That's impossible," Wexford whispered, staring at the authentication code that had been assigned to Commander Elias Kincaid 3 years ago, a code that should have died with him in those distant mountains. Saran's eyes locked with his. "3 minutes until that bogey reaches us, Admiral. Your call." The carrier's alarms continued to blare as Wexford faced an impossible choice. Trust this inexplicable cadet with his most advanced aircraft, or risk the security of his entire fleet. "How?" was all he could manage to ask, the word heavy with implications. Saran's response was quiet but firm. "Approve the launch now, and I promise you'll get your answers when I return." The threat assessment officer called out, "Bogey has locked weapons systems." Wexford made his decision. "Get to that jet, Calloway, now!" As Saren sprinted toward the flight deck, Wexford turned to Commander Takeda. "I want everything we have on Project Lazarus. Everything. And contact the Pentagon secure line. Tell them we have a Code Albatross situation." Takeda's eyes widened at the code designation. "Sir, that protocol hasn't been activated since Echo 5, Wexford finished grimly. "I know." On the flight deck, Saren reached the experimental X-Wing prototype, a sleek black aircraft with lines unlike anything else in the Navy's arsenal. As she approached, the security team guarding it moved to intercept her. "Stand down," Wexford's voice came over their comms. "She's authorized." The security team stepped back, confusion evident on their faces as Saren approached the aircraft's biometric scanner, a security measure coded to recognize only one pilot in the entire Navy. She placed her palm against it without hesitation. The scanner hummed, then glowed green. The cockpit hissed open. The impossible had just become reality. Have you ever wondered if the military keeps secrets even from itself? Who would you trust if everything you believed was suddenly questioned? If you want to see what happens next with Maverick's return and the truth behind Echo 5, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments below, where courage has shown up unexpectedly in your life. Wexford and Commander Takeda watched through the one-way glass as Saren navigated the flight simulator, her movements fluid and precise as she guided the virtual aircraft through a storm-racked mountain range. The simulated terrain matched exactly the classified coordinates of the Echo 5 mission, a route that existed nowhere in the carrier's database. "She's outperforming the original mission parameters," Takeda whispered, pointing to the data readout. "Even Maverick didn't hit these marks." "Because Maverick was flying in an actual typhoon," Wexford responded, his voice tight. "Not in a simulator." On the screen before them, Serene executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional training. Signature moves that had been unique to Commander Elias Kincaid, the pilot who had disappeared 3 years ago during Echo 5. The simulator's tracking system struggled to keep up, occasionally glitching as the virtual aircraft performed what should have been impossible turns and dives. "Pull her file again," Wexford ordered, unable to tear his eyes from the display. Every detail, where she trained, who signed off on her transfer, everything. "Sir," Takeda replied hesitantly, "I already did. There's nothing there beyond what you've seen. It's as if she didn't exist before 2 years ago." The implications of that statement hung in the air between them, too outlandish to voice aloud. On the screen, Saren brought the virtual aircraft through a narrow mountain pass at a speed that would have torn the wings off a real jet, then executed a perfect landing on a makeshift runway barely long enough to accommodate the aircraft. The simulation ended, the screens freezing on a mission completion notification. "Extraction successful. All objectives achieved. Casualties." Aura. Inside the simulator, Saren sat motionless for a long moment, then removed her hands from the controls and closed her eyes. In the blue glow of the screens, her expression was one of profound grief, the first genuine emotion Wexford had seen cross her face. "Sir," Takeda said quietly, "what are we dealing with here?" Wexford didn't answer immediately. He was remembering another pilot, another time, a cocky young commander with an uncanny gift for flight and a disregard for protocol that both inspired and infuriated those around him. Commander Elias Kincaid, call sign Maverick, who had vanished 3 years ago during the ill-fated Echo 5 mission. "I don't know," he finally replied, "but I intend to find out." Dawn broke over the carrier, painting the eastern sky in streaks of fire that reflected off the ocean's surface. The flight deck was already humming with activity as maintenance crews performed their daily checks, their breath visible in the cool morning air. In the officers' mess, Lieutenant Archer Reeves sat alone, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the doorway. When Seren entered, moving with that same measured grace that set her apart. From the other pilots, he straightened in his seat. She collected her breakfast with efficient movements, then scanned the room. Most of the tables were occupied, officers and crew talking in low voices over their meals. Several glanced at Seren, then quickly away, the rumors about her unconventional actions during yesterday's emergency having spread throughout the ship. Noticing an empty seat across from Reeves, Seren approached his table. "Mind if I join you, Lieutenant?" Reeves gestured to the chair. "Free country, Ensign." As she sat, he studied her face, searching for signs of the exhaustion that should follow such an intense simulator session. There were none. Her skin was clear, her eyes alert. If anything, she looked more focused than she had the day before, as if some internal decision had been reached. "That was impressive yesterday with Okafor's jet," Reeves said, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. "Where'd you learn that shutdown sequence?" "Training," Seren said without elaborating, her attention on her meal. "Funny thing," Reeves continued, undeterred by her brevity. "That sequence you used, it was developed by Maverick after the Taiwanese Strait incident. Never made it into the manuals." Seren's fork paused halfway to her mouth, then continued its journey as if nothing had happened. "Maybe you shouldn't believe every legend you hear, Lieutenant." "The thing about legends," Reeves pressed, leaning forward, "is that they're usually based on something real. I served with Kincaid, Maverick, on the Nimitz, before Echo 5. At the mention of the mission, several nearby officers glanced over, then quickly away, as if the very name might bring bad luck. Echo 5 had become a ghost story in the fleet, a cautionary tale about pushing the limits too far. "Did you now?" Seren's tone remained conversational, but something had changed in her posture, a subtle tensing, like a predator suddenly alert. "He had this way about him," Reeves continued, watching her carefully. "Could calculate fuel ratios in his head, faster than the computers. Used to say the numbers just looked different to him, patterns, not figures." He slid a napkin with complex calculations toward her. "Just curious if you could check my math here." Without even looking at the paper, Seren responded, "Your decimal point is off by 2 places, and you're not accounting for headwind resistance." Reeves's face paled. The equations were ones Kincaid had developed himself, a unique method of calculating fuel consumption during extreme maneuvers. There was no way anyone could have known the answer without looking, unless they had created the formula themselves. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Seren met his eyes directly for the first time, and Reeves felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in that gaze, something old, and knowing that had no place in the eyes of a rookie ensign. "You shouldn't talk about classified operations in the mess hall, Lieutenant," she said quietly. "Some ghosts prefer to stay buried." Before Reeves could respond, Commander Lyra Takeda approached their table, her expression professionally neutral. As the carrier's intelligence officer, Takeda moved through the ship like a shadow, collecting information and managing the flow of classified data. "Ensign Calloway," she said, "Admiral Wexford requests your presence in the secure briefing room at 0900 hours. Seren nodded once. "I'll be there, Commander." Takeda hesitated, then added, "He said to tell you that Project Lazarus has been flagged." Something flashed in Seren's eyes, alarm, perhaps, or resignation, before her expression smoothed again into unreadable calm. "Thank you for the message." As Takeda departed, Reeves found himself studying Seren with a mixture of awe and fear. "What is Project Lazarus, Ensign?" Seren stood, collecting her tray. "Not what, Lieutenant? Who?" The secure briefing room was bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, illuminating the tense faces of the ship's senior command staff. Admiral Wexford sat at the head of the conference table, his fingers steepled before him as he studied the woman seated opposite. Serene Calloway met his gaze unflinchingly, her posture relaxed despite being the focus of attention from 6 senior officers, each watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. "Ensign Calloway," Wexford began, his voice carefully neutral. "Or should I call you by another name?" "Ensign is fine for now, sir," Seren replied. Wexford nodded to Commander Takeda, who activated the room's secure display system. Images appeared on the wall screen, classified documents, mission reports, and personnel files, all heavily redacted but sharing a common header: Project Lazarus. 2 years ago, Wexford said, the Pentagon initiated a black book project with that designation. The details are classified beyond even my access level, but I've pieced together enough to know it involved advanced neural mapping and personality transfer research. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Seren's face. The kind of research that might allow a pilot's skills, memories, and instincts to be preserved after physical death. Murmurs ran through the assembled officers. Commander Brax Thorne, who had been watching Seren with increasing concern, broke protocol to interject. "Sir, you can't possibly be suggesting that Ensign Calloway is some kind of, digital ghost of Kincaid? That's science fiction, not naval reality." "Is it?" Wexford replied, sliding a folder across the table to Thorne. 3 years ago, Commander Elias Kincaid underwent extensive neural mapping as part of an experimental program. The official reason was to improve AI training for unmanned aerial vehicles, but the actual purpose was classified even from me. He turned back to Seren. "Until now, I thought it was just another Pentagon boondoggle, but then you showed up on my carrier, an ensign with impossible knowledge and skills identical to a pilot who died in service to this country." Seren remained silent, her expression unchanged. "The authentication code you used yesterday," Wexford continued, "was uniquely assigned to Commander Kincaid. It was invalidated after his death and removed from all systems. Yet, somehow, you have it." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Seren, waiting for an explanation, a denial, anything that might make sense of the impossible situation. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "Project Lazarus was never meant to be operational. It was a contingency, an insurance policy for pilots with skills too valuable to lose." The admission sent a ripple of shock through the room. "You're claiming to be what exactly?" Commander Takeda asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming protocol. "I'm claiming to be who I've always been," Seren replied. "The body is different, the mind is not." Wexford stood abruptly, pacing the length of the conference table. "This is impossible. Consciousness transfer isn't real." "Isn't it?" Seren's voice took on a harder edge. 3 years ago, you authorized the Echo 5 extraction mission, despite intelligence indicating it was a trap. You sent Maverick in because you knew he was the only pilot skilled enough to pull it off, typhoon or no typhoon. The accusation hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Wexford stopped pacing, his face paling slightly. "Before he took off," Seren continued, "you met him on the flight deck. You said something to him, something not in any report or recording." Wexford's eyes narrowed. "What did I say?" "You said, 'The albatross hangs heavy, Commander.' It was your personal authentication phrase, a code between you and your most trusted officers. The correct response was, 'And the truth shall set you free.'" Wexford finished, his voice barely audible. The conference room fell completely silent. That exchange had never been documented, never shared with anyone. It was impossible for Seren to know it unless... "My God," Thorne whispered, staring at Seren with dawning recognition. "It's really you, isn't it, Maverick?" Before Seren could respond, klaxons wailed across the carrier, cutting through the tense atmosphere with urgent electronic shrieks. The tactical officer's voice came over the comm system. "Incoming aircraft, unidentified bogey on approach vector, not responding to identification protocols." The briefing room erupted into controlled chaos as officers raced to their stations. Wexford strode toward the nearest communication panel, demanding updates from the bridge. "Signal scrambled," the tactical officer reported. "Not responding to IFF. ETA 3 minutes. Scramble the alert fighters," Wexford ordered, his mind shifting to combat readiness despite the unresolved questions about Ensign Calloway. "Can't, sir," came the tense reply. "All aircraft are in maintenance cycle following yesterday's hydraulic issue inspection. Nothing's ready for immediate launch." A heavy silence fell over the command staff as the implications sank in. The carrier was effectively defenseless against an approaching unidentified aircraft that refused to communicate, potentially hostile, and definitely a threat. "Missile defense systems are online," the weapons officer reported, "but we'd prefer not to engage unless absolutely necessary." As panic began to spread among the junior officers, Seren stepped forward, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable note of authority that seemed at odds with her rank. "There's one aircraft ready, sir, the X-Wing prototype on the far deck." Wexford turned to her sharply. "That's an experimental aircraft. Nobody's cleared to fly it except—" "I am," Seren interrupted. She produced a small device from her pocket and pressed her thumb to its surface. A holographic authentication code shimmered into existence between them, a complex shifting pattern of symbols and numbers. "Authorization Echo 5, she said quietly. The code, one Wexford recognized instantly as belonging to a dead man, froze everyone in place. Senior officers stared in disbelief, while junior personnel looked confused but sensed the gravity of the moment. "That's impossible," Wexford whispered, staring at the authentication code that had been assigned to Commander Elias Kincaid 3 years ago, a code that should have died with him in those distant mountains. Seren's eyes locked with his. 3 minutes until that bogey reaches us, Admiral. Your call." The carrier's alarms continued to blare as Wexford faced an impossible choice. Trust this inexplicable cadet with his most advanced aircraft, or risk the security of his entire fleet. "How?" was all he could manage to ask, the word heavy with implications. Serene's response was quiet but firm. "Approve the launch now, and I promise you'll get your answers when I return." The threat assessment officer called out, "Bogey has locked weapons systems." Wexford made his decision. "Get to that jet, Calloway, now!" The flight deck was a storm of activity as Seren sprinted across it, deck crew scrambling to clear a path, despite their confusion about what was happening. The X-Wing prototype sat on the far end of the runway, its sleek black form unlike anything else in the Navy's arsenal, all sharp angles and cutting-edge stealth technology. As Seren approached, the security team guarding it moved to intercept her, hands on their sidearms. "Stand down," Wexford's voice came over their comms. "She's authorized." The security team stepped back, confusion evident on their faces as Seren approached the aircraft's biometric scanner, a security measure coded to recognize only one pilot in the entire Navy. She placed her palm against it without hesitation. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the scanner hummed, a soft green light glowing beneath her hand. The cockpit hiss opened. "That's impossible," Commander Takeda whispered from beside Wexford on the bridge. "That scanner is coded to Kincaid's exact biometric signature." "Apparently not anymore," Wexford replied grimly, watching as Seren climbed into the cockpit with practiced efficiency. The X-Wing's engines ignited with a distinctive howl that sent chills down the spines of veteran deck crew. Many had heard that sound before, the unique acoustic signature of Maverick's aircraft, tuned precisely to his specifications. Over the comm system, Seren's voice came through clear and confident. "Control, this is Calloway, requesting emergency launch clearance." After a beat of silence, Wexford grabbed the microphone. "Granted, but you'll have answers when you return, Ensign." The X-Wing launched with devastating acceleration, climbing at a near vertical angle that would have caused most pilots to black out from G-forces. Seren handled it as if she were taking a leisurely Sunday drive, banking the aircraft with a grace that defied the laws of aerodynamics. From the bridge, they tracked her approach toward the unidentified aircraft, a stealth drone with Chinese markings, its electronic signature deliberately scrambled to confuse identification systems. It carried no visible weapons, but bristled with advanced surveillance equipment. Rather than engaging directly, Seren executed a series of increasingly complex maneuvers, forcing the drone to follow and depleting its fuel reserves. It was a tactic that had been developed but never documented by Maverick, a way to neutralize reconnaissance aircraft without creating an international incident by shooting them down. "She's flying exactly like him," Lieutenant Reeves said from his position in the bridge, having been summoned by Wexford to observe. "Those are Maverick's moves, Admiral. No one else flies like that." The entire bridge watched in stunned silence as Seren outmaneuvered the drone, forcing it away from the carrier's sensitive experimental systems without firing a shot. After 15 minutes of aerial chess, the drone's fuel reserves depleted to critical levels, forcing it to break off and return to its base of operations. Seren's voice came over the comm. Threat neutralized, returning to carrier. Her landing was textbook perfect, despite high crosswinds that had developed during the engagement. The X-Wing touched down with surgical precision, coming to a stop at exactly the designated point on the deck. As the engines powered down, a crowd had gathered. Pilots, deck crew, and officers, all drawn by the impossible sight of the experimental aircraft being flown by an ensign who shouldn't have been able to access it, let alone fly it with that level of skill. Seren climbed down from the cockpit to find Wexford waiting with Takeda and a Pentagon official who had mysteriously appeared on ship during the crisis, Director Vivian Nash, head of Special Projects Division, and, if rumors were to be believed, one of the architects of Project Lazarus. That authentication code, Wexford said without preamble, belonged to Commander Elias Kincaid, call sign Maverick. He died 3 years ago. Did he? Seren asked quietly, removing her flight helmet to reveal eyes that seemed far older than her physical appearance suggested. Director Nash stepped forward, her severe expression conveying both anger and fascination. Project Lazarus was never supposed to be operational. The transfer process was theoretical, a proof of concept at best. Serene faced them directly, her posture shifting subtly into one that those who had known Kincaid would immediately recognize, the confident stance of a pilot who knew his worth and wasn't afraid to remind others of it. The hostages were the priority, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. The extraction team was expendable, but some memories are too stubborn to die. She removed her flight glove, revealing a small tattoo on her wrist matching the authentication symbol she had displayed earlier, a mark that had been exclusive to Kincaid and documented in his classified personnel file. My body died in that mountain range, Admiral, she continued, her eyes locked with Wexford's. But they'd already taken samples, neural maps, insurance policies for their most valuable assets. You're claiming to be Kincaid? Wexford asked incredulously, though the evidence before him was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. I'm claiming to be Maverick, Seren corrected. Kincaid was just the body I used to wear. Director Nash attempted to interject. This is highly classified information that cannot be discussed in an unsecured. 3 years, Seren cut her off, a flash of anger breaking through her composed exterior. 3 years of tests, training, being told I'm just a program with delusions of humanity, then they needed me again. She turned back to Wexford. You recommended me for Echo 5, said I was the only one who could pull it off. You were right, and when it went wrong, you signed the order burying my existence. Recognition dawned on Wexford's face as pieces fell into place. The extraction call, that phrase about the albatross. And the truth shall set you free, Seren completed. Our personal authentication, something only Kincaid would know. The flight deck fell silent as Wexford straightened to attention and, with profound respect, saluted. Welcome back, Maverick. The sunset painted the Admiral's ready room in shades of gold and crimson, the light reflecting off the polished surfaces of model aircraft and framed commendations that lined the walls. Wexford poured 2 glasses of bourbon, sliding one across the desk to Seren. No, to Maverick, he corrected himself mentally, still struggling to reconcile the young woman before him with the pilot he had known. The Pentagon will want to keep you as their secret weapon, Wexford said, taking a seat across from her. Nash is already making calls. I didn't come back for them, Maverick responded, taking a measured sip of the bourbon. I came back because there's unfinished business. The Echo 5 mission wasn't a rescue gone wrong. It was a setup. She slid a data chip across the desk. Someone wanted those hostages dead, someone high up. When I got them out anyway, they made sure I didn't make it home to report what I saw. Wexford studied the chip, turning it over in his fingers without inserting it into his computer. Why trust me now? I signed your death certificate. Because you were following orders, believing you were protecting national security. But now you know better. She leaned forward, and for a moment, Wexford could see Kincaid in her eyes, in the set of her jaw. And because, deep down, you never believed I was gone. Before Wexford could respond, his secure line rang, a direct connection to the Pentagon that bypassed normal communication channels. He answered with caution, aware of Maverick watching him intently. Admiral Wexford speaking. The voice on the other end was clipped and authoritative. This is Secretary of Defense Hargrove. I understand you've had an incident involving Project Lazarus. Wexford's eyes flicked to Maverick, who had gone very still. Yes, sir. An unexpected development. I need you to detain the subject immediately, Admiral. Full isolation protocols. A retrieval team is en route to your position. ETA 6 hours. May I ask why, sir? Wexford kept his tone neutral, though his knuckles had whitened around the receiver. Project Lazarus has been compromised. The subject may be operating under external influence or programming. Consider it a national security threat until proven otherwise. After the call ended, Wexford sat in silence for a long moment, weighing loyalty against duty, past against present. Finally, he looked up at Maverick. They're coming for you. I know, she replied, not seeming surprised. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Wexford stood, moving to the window that overlooked the flight deck. Below, the X-Wing prototype sat gleaming in the last rays of the setting sun, its sleek form a testament to American engineering and billions in classified research. I need to know what's on that chip, he said finally. I need to know what really happened during Echo 5. Maverick nodded once. Then, we don't have much time. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a brisk wind sweeping across the flight deck as the squadron assembled for inspection. The pilots stood at attention in perfect formation, their faces revealing nothing of the rumors that had spread like wildfire throughout the ship overnight. This time, Maverick stood at the front of the line, no longer relegated to the back with the new recruits. She wore proper pilot insignia now, her uniform adjusted to reflect a rank change that had been processed with unprecedented speed. Admiral Wexford approached, his manner transformed from the condescension of their first meeting. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the assembled pilots with a new intensity. At ease, he ordered, and the formation relaxed slightly. I have several announcements this morning. First, effective immediately, Ensign Calloway has been reclassified. Murmurs ran through the ranks despite military discipline. She will serve as squadron leader for the new Ghost Wing Special Operations Unit, which is being formed as we speak. Lieutenant Reeves, standing nearby, stared in disbelief. A jump from ensign to squadron leader was unheard of, a violation of every promotion protocol in the Navy. Some of you, Wexford continued, his voice carrying across the deck, thought it appropriate to judge an officer by appearance rather than ability. Let this be a lesson in humility and respect. He turned to Maverick, his expression solemn. The X-Wing prototype is yours, Lieutenant Commander. I've authorized your reinstatement at full rank. As the squadron saluted their new leader, Wexford added quietly, for her ears only, and the call sign stays. Maverick nodded once. Never left, sir. Later, as pilots prepared for a training exercise, Reeves approached Maverick as she performed pre-flight checks on the X-Wing. The Echo 5 mission, he said without preamble. Did you really pull those people out during a typhoon? Maverick checked her flight systems, her movements precise and economical. The storm wasn't the problem. Then what was? She glanced up, meeting his eyes with a gaze that seemed to look through him rather than at him. The people who sent me there. Before he could press further, her attention shifted to something over his shoulder. Reeves turned to see a group of black-clad figures exiting a transport helicopter that had just landed at the far end of the deck. They moved with the unmistakable precision of Special Operations Forces. The retrieval team is early, Maverick observed, her voice calm despite the implication. What retrieval team? Reeves asked. The one that's come to put me back in my box, Lieutenant. She climbed into the X-Wing's cockpit with fluid grace. Permission to take Ghost Wing on a training run, Admiral? Wexford's voice came through the comm system, steady and resolute. Granted, Maverick. What's your flight plan? There was a pause before she answered, her eyes locked on the approaching Special Forces team. Let's show them what they never saw coming. The X-Wing's engines ignited with their distinctive howl, and Reeves barely had time to step back before the aircraft launched with breathtaking acceleration. 5 other jets followed in perfect formation, pilots who had been briefed in secret during the night and chosen for their loyalty as much as their skill. From the bridge, Wexford watched them disappear into the clouds, then turned to Commander Takeda. Begin the investigation. I want to know who was behind Echo 5. Sir, the Pentagon has buried those files completely. Wexford's expression hardened with resolve. Some truths refuse to stay buried. Commander, just like some pilots. On his secure monitor, an alert flashed. Priority message, Secretary of Defense. The text read, Terminate project. Lazarus immediately. Subject, Calloway to be detained. Wexford glanced at the sky, where Maverick led her squadron, then deliberately closed the message without responding. Into his comm, he spoke quietly. Ghostwing, be advised, you're cleared for extended operations. Maintain radio silence until further notice. Over the open channel, Maverick's voice came back with knowing certainty. Copy that, Admiral. Ghostwing going dark. The X-Wing banked sharply toward the horizon, the squadron following in perfect formation. A reckoning 3 years in the making, finally taking flight. As the Special Forces team reached the bridge, their commander approached Wexford with a sealed order. Sir, we're here to take custody of Ensign Calloway under Pentagon Directive 3-79. Wexford studied the man for a moment, then replied with deliberate precision. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Lieutenant Commander Calloway is currently engaged in a classified training exercise outside our communication range. That's a direct violation of Secretary Hargrove's orders, Admiral, the commander said, his hand moving subtly toward his sidearm. Interesting that Secretary Hargrove would issue such an order, Wexford replied, sliding a tablet across the console. Considering the evidence we've uncovered, linking him directly to the sabotage of Echo 5. The commander froze, his eyes widening as he stared at the screen. Displayed there was classified footage from the hostage compound during the Echo 5 mission, footage showing American operatives deliberately undermining the rescue attempt, with written orders traced back to Hargrove's office. The truth doesn't stay buried forever, Commander, Wexford said quietly. The question is, whose side are you really on? As the tension on the bridge reached breaking point, radar systems suddenly blared warnings. New contacts had appeared on the screen. 5 unidentified aircraft approaching at supersonic speed from the Chinese mainland. Sir, the tactical officer called out, we have incoming hostiles. Ghostwing is not responding to recall. Wexford's expression remained calm as he studied the radar display, watching as the X-Wing and its squadron adjusted course to intercept the incoming threat. They don't need to respond, he said, a hint of pride in his voice. Maverick already knew they were coming. The Special Forces commander stared at the screen, then back at Wexford, the realization dawning in his eyes. This wasn't about a rogue pilot at all, was it? This was a trap. Not a trap, Wexford corrected. A reckoning. As they watched, Ghostwing engaged the incoming aircraft with devastating efficiency, led by a black X-Wing that moved through the sky like nothing they had ever seen before. A ghost of the past, returned to set things right. Would you risk everything to stand up for the truth? For someone whose very existence challenges everything you thought you knew? If you want to see how Maverick's impossible return changes everything, hit subscribe and join us for the final chapter. Leave a comment about a time when someone's unexpected return changed your world, proving that some bonds never truly break. Seren sprinted toward the experimental jet without waiting for further permission, her movements fluid and economical, without a single wasted motion. Wexford followed several paces behind with security personnel, his face a mask of conflicted emotions, as he watched her approach the aircraft that should have rejected any pilot other than its designated commander. The X-Wing prototype sat on the far end of the flight deck, its sleek black form unlike anything else in the Navy's arsenal. All sharp angles and cutting-edge stealth technology designed to evade the most sophisticated radar systems. Morning light glinted off its matte surface, giving it an almost predatory appearance. As Seren approached, the security team guarding it moved to intercept her, hands instinctively moving to their sidearms. Stand down, Wexford's voice came over their comms. She's authorized. The security team stepped back, confusion evident on their faces, as Seren approached the aircraft's biometric scanner, a security measure coded to recognize only one pilot in the entire Navy. She placed her palm against it without hesitation. The scanner hummed, a soft green light glowing beneath her hand. The cockpit hissed open. That's impossible, Commander Takeda whispered from beside Wexford on the bridge. That scanner is coded to Kincaid's exact biometric signature. Apparently not anymore, Wexford replied grimly, watching as Seren climbed into the cockpit with practiced efficiency. The X-Wing's engines ignited with a distinctive howl that sent chills down the spines of veteran deck crew. Many had heard that sound before, the unique acoustic signature of Maverick's aircraft, tuned precisely to his specifications. Over the comm system, Soren's voice came through clear and confident. "Control, this is Calloway, requesting emergency launch clearance." After a beat of silence, Wexford grabbed the microphone. "Granted, but you'll have answers when you return, Ensign." The X-Wing launched with devastating acceleration, climbing at a near vertical angle that would have caused most pilots to black out from G-forces. Soren handled it as if she were taking a leisurely Sunday drive, banking the aircraft with a grace that defied the laws of aerodynamics. From the bridge, they tracked her approach toward the unidentified aircraft, a stealth drone with Chinese markings, its electronic signature deliberately scrambled to confuse identification systems. It carried no visible weapons but bristled with advanced surveillance equipment, clearly designed to gather intelligence on the carrier's experimental systems and capabilities. Rather than engaging directly, Soren executed a series of increasingly complex maneuvers, forcing the drone to follow and depleting its fuel reserves. It was a tactic that had been developed but never documented by Maverick, a way to neutralize reconnaissance aircraft without creating an international incident by shooting them down. "She's flying exactly like him," Lieutenant Reeves said from his position in the bridge, having been summoned by Wexford to observe. "Those are Maverick's moves, Admiral. No one else flies like that." The entire bridge watched in stunned silence as Soren outmaneuvered the drone, forcing it away from the carrier's sensitive experimental systems without firing a shot. After 15 minutes of aerial chess, the drone's fuel reserves depleted to critical levels, forcing it to break off and return to its base of operations. Soren's voice came over the comm. "Threat neutralized, returning to carrier." Her landing was textbook perfect despite high crosswinds that had developed during the engagement. The X-Wing touched down with surgical precision, coming to a stop at exactly the designated point on the deck. As the engines powered down, a crowd had gathered, pilots, deck crew, and officers, all drawn by the impossible sight of the experimental aircraft being flown by an ensign who shouldn't have been able to access it, let alone fly it with that level of skill. Soren climbed down from the cockpit to find Wexford waiting with Takeda, and a Pentagon official who had mysteriously appeared on ship during the crisis, Director Vivian Nash, head of Special Projects Division, and, if rumors were to be believed, one of the architects of Project Lazarus. "That authentication code," Wexford said without preamble, "belonged to Commander Elias Kincaid, call sign Maverick. He died 3 years ago." "Did he?" Serene asked quietly, removing her flight helmet to reveal eyes that seemed far older than her physical appearance suggested. Director Nash stepped forward, her severe expression conveying both anger and fascination. Project Lazarus was never supposed to be operational. The transfer process was theoretical, a proof of concept at best. Soren faced them directly, her posture shifting subtly into one that those who had known Kincaid would immediately recognize. The confident stance of a pilot who knew his worth and wasn't afraid to remind others of it. "The hostages were the priority," she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "The extraction team was expendable, but some memories are too stubborn to die." She removed her flight glove, revealing a small tattoo on her wrist, matching the authentication symbol she had displayed earlier, a mark that had been exclusive to Kincaid and documented in his classified personnel file. "My body died in that mountain range, Admiral," she continued, her eyes locked with Wexford's. "But they'd already taken samples, neural maps, insurance policies for their most valuable assets." "You're claiming to be Kincaid?" Wexford asked incredulously, though the evidence before him was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. "I'm claiming to be Maverick," Soren corrected. "Kincaid was just the body I used to wear." Director Nash interjects. "This is highly classified information that cannot be discussed in an unsecured." 3 years, Soren cut her off, a flash of anger breaking through her composed exterior. 3 years of tests, training, being told I'm just a program with delusions of humanity. Then they needed me again. She turned back to Wexford. "You recommended me for Echo 5, said I was the only one who could pull it off. You were right. And when it went wrong, you signed the order burying my existence." Recognition dawned on Wexford's face as pieces fell into place. "The extraction call. That phrase about the albatross. And the truth shall set you free, Seren completed. Our personal authentication, something only Kincaid would know. The flight deck fell silent as Wexford straightened to attention and, with profound respect, saluted. Welcome back, Maverick. Around them, pilots and crew members exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to process the implications of what they were witnessing. The murmurs began to spread, a ripple of shock and disbelief washing across the deck. Director Nash stepped between them, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Admiral, this is a breach of national security. We need to contain this situation immediately. Wexford's expression hardened. I think we're well beyond containment, Director. The truth is standing right in front of us. Nash's eyes narrowed. The truth? The truth is that this is an experimental military asset that has gone rogue. Project Lazarus was never meant to create a fully autonomous personality transfer. The neural patterns were supposed to be controlled, contained within specific operational parameters. And yet here I am, Maverick said, the familiar cocky half-smile that had been Kincaid's signature expression, now strange yet fitting on Seren's face. Fully operational and outside your control. Nash's hand moved subtly toward the secure phone at her hip. This situation requires immediate intervention. Secretary Hargrove will want to... Secretary Hargrove, Maverick interrupted, has a lot to answer for regarding Echo 5. The statement froze Nash mid-motion, her expression flickering between shock and calculation. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Maverick replied, turning to address Wexford. I'm stating that the Echo 5 mission wasn't a rescue gone wrong. It was a deliberate setup designed to eliminate 16 people who knew too much, along with the pilot sent to extract them. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence, shocking even those who had only the vaguest understanding of the classified mission. Wexford's voice was quiet, but clear when he finally spoke. My office, now, all senior officers and director. Nash. As they moved toward the island superstructure, leaving the flight deck buzzing with whispers and speculation, Nash fell into step beside Wexford. You're making a grave mistake, Admiral, she hissed. This isn't Kincaid. It's a sophisticated AI programmed with his memory patterns, designed to mimic his abilities, but lacking the judgment and loyalty of a true naval officer. Wexford's response was measured but firm. Then you won't mind if we examine the evidence she claims to have, will you, Director? Nash's silence was answer enough. The Admiral's ready room was bathed in the warm glow of afternoon sunlight, streaming through the porthole windows, catching motes of dust suspended in the air and illuminating the faces of those assembled around the large tactical display table. Wexford had limited attendance to only his most trusted officers, Commander Takeda, Lieutenant Commander Thorne, and Lieutenant Reeves, along with Director Nash, whose tightly controlled expression betrayed her unease. Maverick stood at the head of the table, still wearing the flight suit that had been tailored for Seren Calloway's form, but now carrying herself with the unmistakable bearing of a senior officer. 3 years ago, she began without preamble. I was tasked with extracting 16 intelligence assets from a compound in the South China Sea during a typhoon. The mission was classified above top secret, and I was told that these individuals had critical information regarding Chinese military expansion that could prevent a regional conflict. She inserted a small data chip into the table's secure reader. Immediately, classified documents and mission parameters appeared on the display, their authenticity verified by the system's security protocols. The extraction itself was nearly impossible. Heavy weather, hostile airspace, minimal support. But the real problem began after I had successfully removed all 16 targets from the compound. Images appeared, showing radar tracks and communication logs from the mission. 20 minutes into the extraction flight, I received new coordinates from command, directing me to an alternate extraction point due to compromised security at the original rendezvous. She highlighted a transmission signature. This order came directly from Secretary Hargrove's office, bypassing normal chain of command. Director Nash straightened, her voice tight. That's standard procedure during high-risk extractions when operational security may be compromised. Except, Maverick continued, bringing up a new set of data. The new coordinates placed us directly in the path of an approaching Chinese destroyer with advanced anti-aircraft capabilities, information that was available to Pentagon intelligence but conspicuously absent from the mission brief I received. The implications hung heavy in the room. Wexford leaned forward, studying the tactical display with growing concern. You're suggesting this was deliberately designed to fail? To eliminate both you and the intelligence assets? I'm not suggesting it, Maverick replied, pulling up personnel files of the 16 extracted individuals. I'm stating it as fact. These people weren't random intelligence assets. They were part of a joint U.S.-China cybersecurity task force that had uncovered evidence of high-level American officials selling classified weapons technology to Beijing. Director Nash's face had gone pale. These are serious accusations without proper evidence, Maverick interrupted, bringing up a final file, an audio recording that began to play through the room's speakers. Secretary Hargrove's distinctive voice filled the room. The task force has become a liability. Their findings cannot be allowed to reach Washington. Arrange for their extraction, then ensure the aircraft never reaches its destination. Make it look like an accident. The Typhoon provides perfect cover. A second voice responded. And the pilot? Regrettable collateral damage. Choose someone expendable. The recording ended, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. All eyes turned to Director Nash, whose composure had finally cracked, her expression a mixture of calculation and fear. That recording is obviously fabricated, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It was in an encrypted file on one of the asset's personal devices, Maverick replied. I discovered it during the flight when I was going through their materials, trying to understand what made them so valuable. When I heard it, I knew we'd been set up to die. She turned to Wexford. That's why I diverted from both the original plan and the new coordinates, taking us through the heart of the storm instead. It was the only path that avoided both Chinese air defenses and our own friendly assets that were waiting to ensure we never made it home. Wexford's expression had hardened into granite as the pieces fell into place. You got the hostages out. I delivered them to an alternate extraction point, a CIA black site in the Philippines. But my aircraft was damaged in the storm, and I was forced to ditch in the South China Sea. The official report listed me as killed in action, missing, and presumed dead. And then, Takeda interjected, understanding dawning in her eyes. Project Lazarus activated. Maverick nodded. Apparently, I was too valuable an asset to lose completely. The neural mapping they'd done as part of their experimental program was comprehensive enough to recreate my consciousness, my memories, skills, instincts, everything that made me Maverick. But not in your original body, Reeves said, studying Serene's face with new understanding. No, Maverick confirmed. Kincaid's body was lost, so they found a new host, a promising pilot candidate with the right physical attributes and psychological profile, Seren Calloway. Was there ever a real Seren Calloway? Thorne asked quietly. A flicker of genuine grief crossed Maverick's face. Yes, she volunteered for an experimental program she believed would enhance pilot performance. She didn't know she was signing up to have her consciousness overwritten with mine. The revelation sent a chill through the room. Nash seized on the moment of vulnerability. You see, this isn't Kincaid talking. This is guilt. The transfer process creates emotional instability, paranoia, delusions of persecution. This is exactly why Project Lazarus was never meant to be fully deployed. Or maybe, Wexford countered, it's why Maverick was sent here, to expose a conspiracy that goes right to the top. A conspiracy you're part of, Director Nash. Nash's hand moved toward her jacket, but Maverick was faster, catching her wrist before she could reach whatever was concealed there. Don't, Maverick said quietly. Nash froze, then slowly relaxed her arm. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Admiral. This goes far beyond one mission or one pilot. Project Lazarus was just the beginning. We're creating the future of warfare, soldiers who can't die, who carry their experience and skills across multiple bodies. The strategic advantage is incalculable. At what cost? Wexford demanded. The lives of innocent servicemen and women? The very humanity of the operators you claim to value so highly? Before Nash could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The tactical officer's voice came over the intercom. Admiral to the bridge, multiple incoming aircraft, Chinese markings, approaching at attack speed. The ready room erupted into controlled chaos as officers moved to their battle stations. Wexford turned to security personnel who had been stationed outside the door. Place Director Nash under arrest for conspiracy and treason, then get to the bridge. As Nash was led away protesting vehemently, Wexford turned to Maverick. I need you in the air, now. Maverick nodded once. Ghost Wing? Authorized, Wexford confirmed. Choose your pilots. I want our best up there. 10 minutes later, Maverick stood on the flight deck, the wind whipping at her flight suit as she addressed 5 pilots who had been hastily assembled, each chosen for their skill, loyalty, and ability to follow orders without unnecessary questions. This isn't a training exercise, she told them, her voice carrying despite the roar of the X-Wing's engines being prepared behind her. Chinese forces are moving to intercept what they believe is a vulnerable carrier. We're going to change their minds. Lieutenant Reeves, standing among the selected pilots, raised a hand. Permission to speak freely, Commander. Maverick nodded. The crew deserves to know who they're really following up there. A tense silence fell over the small group as Maverick considered his words. Finally, she nodded again. My name is Commander Elias Kincaid, call sign Maverick. 3 years ago, I was presumed dead during the Echo 5 extraction mission. The details of my return are classified, but what matters now is that I'm here and we have a job to do. Instead of the shock or disbelief she might have expected, the pilots straightened to attention, each saluting with sharp precision. Ghost Wing stands ready, Commander Maverick, Reeves said, speaking for all of them. The moment of recognition sent a surge of emotion through Maverick, not just pride, but a sense of belonging that had been absent since her return in this unfamiliar body. She returned their salute, then turned to the waiting aircraft. Ghost Wing, launch in 30 seconds. Form up on my 6 once airborne. We fly as one or not at all. The X-Wing prototype lifted off first, its distinctive engine howl cutting through the sounds of battle stations being manned throughout the carrier. 5 FA-18 Super Hornets followed in perfect sequence, forming a tight V formation as they climbed into the clear blue sky. From the bridge, Wexford watched them go, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his weathered face. Pride, concern, and a deep abiding anger at the betrayal that had nearly cost the life of one of his finest officers. Sir, Commander Takeda reported, we have confirmed 12 Chinese aircraft inbound, supported by 2 destroyers just beyond our defensive perimeter. And from behind? Wexford asked, his eyes still on the departing Ghost Wing. Takeda hesitated. Satellite surveillance shows 2 unmarked vessels approaching from our rear quadrant. American construction, but no identifying markings. Hargrove's insurance policy, Wexford muttered. He's making sure his secret dies with us if necessary. He turned to his communications officer. Broadcast on all secure channels. Authentication code, Albatross Rising. Message begins. USS Intrepid declaring Operation Broken Arrow. Evidence of treason at highest levels. Project Lazarus compromised. Request immediate assistance from all Allied vessels within range. The bridge fell silent as the implications of the order sank in. Operation Broken Arrow was a last resort protocol, declaring that a U.S. military asset had been compromised by enemy action or internal sabotage. It bypassed normal chain of command, alerting all nearby American and Allied forces to the situation, while initiating automatic safeguards against further compromise. Sir, the communications officer said after a moment, message acknowledged by USS Reagan Battle Group. They're diverting to our position, ETA 40 minutes. Wexford nodded, his attention returning to the tactical display showing Ghost Wing's approach toward the incoming Chinese aircraft. Let's hope Maverick can buy us that time. High above the carrier, Maverick led Ghost Wing into the teeth of the Chinese formation, the X-Wing's advanced stealth capabilities allowing her to approach almost invisibly, while her squadron fanned out in a classic intercept pattern. Ghost Wing, weapons free but maintain discipline, she ordered over the secure channel. Our job is defense, not provocation. Drive them. Back, don't destroy, unless absolutely necessary. What followed was a masterclass in aerial combat tactics. Maverick's X-Wing darted through the Chinese formation with impossible grace, disrupting their coordination while never firing a shot. The Super Hornets followed her lead, using aggressive maneuvers to force the Chinese pilots into defensive postures without directly engaging. It was psychological warfare at its finest, demonstrating overwhelming skill and coordination without crossing the line into actual combat that might trigger an international incident. After 15 tense minutes, the Chinese formation began to break apart, pilots recognizing they were outmatched by the American squadron's unexpected expertise. They retreated toward their supporting destroyers, maintaining a wary distance but no longer presenting an immediate threat. "Ghost lead to Intrepid," Maverick reported. "Chinese forces withdrawing to standoff distance. Be advised, we still have unidentified vessels approaching from your 6. "Acknowledged, Ghost lead," Wexford's voice came back. "Reagan battle group inbound. Maintain air superiority until they arrive." "Copy that, Admiral. Ghost Wing will—" Her transmission cut off as warning systems suddenly blared throughout the X-Wing's cockpit. Missile lock indicators flashed red across her heads-up display. "Ghost Wing, break formation, incoming missiles, bearing 180. The Super Hornet scattered as directed, deploying countermeasures and executing evasive maneuvers. But the missiles weren't targeting them. All 6 missiles were locked onto the X-Wing. "They're targeting Maverick specifically," Reeves realized, his voice tight with alarm over the comm. "Those aren't Chinese missiles." In the X-Wing's cockpit, Maverick's hands moved with blinding speed across the controls, the aircraft responding to her commands as if it were an extension of her body. The experimental jet executed a series of maneuvers that should have been aerodynamically impossible, twisting and diving through the air with supernatural agility. 5 missiles lost lock and detonated harmlessly in empty air. The 6th, however, employed more advanced tracking technology, adjusting its course to follow the X-Wing's erratic path. "Ghost Wing, maintain formation," Maverick ordered, her voice unnaturally calm. "Protect the carrier. I'll handle this." Without waiting for acknowledgement, she sent the X-Wing into a steep climb, drawing the missile away from both her squadron and the Intrepid. As the altimeter spun upward, passing 30,000 feet, she executed a maneuver that Kincaid had theorized but never attempted in a real aircraft. A combination of an Immelman turn and a flat spin that no human pilot should have been able to survive due to the G-forces involved. The X-Wing briefly appeared to stall, hanging motionless in the air as the missile overshot its position. In that split second of opportunity, Maverick fired a single shot from the aircraft's experimental pulse cannon, detonating the missile a safe distance away. "Ghost lead to Intrepid," she reported, bringing the X-Wing back to formation altitude. "Threat neutralized. Those missiles came from the unmarked vessels, not the Chinese forces." On the bridge, Wexford's expression darkened. "Confirmed, Ghost lead. Reagan reports ETA now 15 minutes. Can you identify the source vessels?" "Affirmative," Maverick replied after a moment. "They're matching the profile of Black Eagle-class covert operations vessels, Pentagon Special Activities Division." Wexford exchanged a grim look with Takeda, Hargrove's cleaning crew. The next quarter hour unfolded with excruciating tension. Ghostwing maintained a protective formation above the Intrepid, while the Chinese forces kept their distance, seemingly content to observe the strange standoff between American vessels. When the USS Reagan and its escort ships finally appeared on the horizon, the unmarked vessels made no attempt to flee or engage. Instead, they maintained position, neither advancing nor retreating. "Ghost lead, this is Intrepid," Wexford's voice came through Maverick's comm. "Reagan Battle Group has secured the perimeter. You are cleared to return to carrier." "Copy that, Admiral. Ghost Wing returning to base." As the squadron approached the flight deck, Maverick noted an unusual amount of activity, not just the normal landing preparations, but what appeared to be a formal reception, with the ship's company lined up in parade formation. The X-Wing touched down first, followed in perfect sequence by the 5 Super Hornets. As Maverick powered down the experimental aircraft systems, she saw Admiral Wexford waiting on the deck, accompanied by officers from both the Intrepid and the newly arrived Reagan Battle Group. She climbed down from the cockpit to find the assembled crew standing at attention, all eyes on her. Wexford stepped forward, his expression solemn, but eyes bright with something like pride. "Commander Kincaid," he said formally, using the name for the first time since her return. "The USS Reagan has brought representatives from Naval Intelligence and the Joint Chiefs. They've reviewed the evidence you provided regarding Secretary Hargrove and Project Lazarus." Maverick stood perfectly still, aware of the weight of the moment, not just for herself, but for the future of a program that had crossed ethical lines in ways even she didn't fully understand. "And," she asked simply, "Hargrove has been taken into custody pending investigation. The unmarked vessels have been secured by Reagan's Special Operations Team. Wexford's voice carried across the silent deck. Project Lazarus has been officially terminated, with all research materials to be placed under Joint Chiefs supervision. A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled crew as the implications became clear. Maverick felt a complex surge of emotions: relief, vindication, but also a deeper uncertainty about what this meant for her own existence. "What happens now, Admiral?" she asked, her voice low enough that only Wexford could hear. "That," he replied, "depends on you, Maverick." He extended his hand, holding what appeared to be standard naval identification tags. "These are yours, if you want them." Maverick took the tags, examining them with surprise. They bore the name Commander Elias Maverick Kincaid, along with a new service number. "The Joint Chiefs have made an unprecedented decision," Wexford explained. "Given the extraordinary circumstances and in recognition of your service and sacrifice, you are being officially reinstated under your original identity, regardless of your current physical form." The formality in his tone couldn't quite mask the emotion beneath it, the relief of a commanding officer who had recovered a valued subordinate thought lost forever. "And Calloway?" Maverick asked, the weight of the other life she had displaced heavy in her voice. "Her sacrifice will be honored," Wexford said gently. "Her family will be told she died in service to her country, with full honors and benefits." It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough to compensate for a life essentially erased. But it was all that could be offered now. Maverick nodded once, accepting the impossible burden of carrying two identities within one consciousness. "Ghostwing will need a commander," Wexford continued. "Someone who understands both the possibilities and the dangers of what we're facing in this new era of warfare. Someone who has literally been on both sides of the technological divide." Maverick looked past him to the assembled pilots of Ghostwing, who stood at attention, awaiting her decision. Among them, Lieutenant Reeves met her gaze with steady confidence, a silent acknowledgement of the strange new reality they now inhabited. "I'll need full autonomy," she said, turning back to Wexford. "No oversight from Pentagon Special Projects or anyone connected to Hargrove's network." "Already arranged," Wexford confirmed. "Ghostwing reports directly to the Joint Chiefs through me. No intermediaries." Maverick nodded again. Decision made. "Then I accept, Admiral." Wexford turned to face the assembled crew. "Attention on deck. It is my privilege to officially introduce Commander Elias Maverick Kincaid, who has returned to active duty under extraordinary circumstances to lead our new Ghostwing Special Operations Unit." He saluted crisply, the gesture echoed by every officer and enlisted person on the deck. "Welcome back, Commander." Maverick returned the salute, the motion feeling both strange and familiar in this body that was not originally hers. "Thank you, Admiral. It's good to be home." Later, as the sun set over the carrier, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Maverick stood alone at the ship's railing, watching the endless horizon where sea met sky. The weight of the day's revelations and decisions sat heavily on her shoulders, along with the deeper questions that remained unanswered. Who was she really? Kincaid's consciousness in Calloway's body? Some hybrid entity created by advanced technology? Or something entirely new? A pioneer on the frontier of what it meant to be human, in an age where consciousness itself could be transferred from one vessel to another. She heard footsteps approaching, but didn't turn, recognizing the measured cadence of Admiral Wexford's walk. "Ghostwing will be ready for full operations within the week," Wexford said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "The Joint Chiefs want you to lead the investigation into how deep Hargrove's conspiracy goes." "And Project Lazarus?" Maverick asked. "What happens to the research, to the technology that created whatever I am now?" Wexford sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of moral complexity. "That's still being determined. Some argue it should be destroyed completely. Others see potential applications that could save lives in the future, if properly regulated." "There's no putting this genie back in the bottle," Maverick observed. "If we figured it out, others will too, eventually." "All the more reason to have someone like you involved in whatever comes next," Wexford replied. "Someone who understands the human cost, not just the strategic advantages." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Wexford asked finally. "Coming back this way, I mean." Maverick considered the question carefully. I regret the cost to Calloway. She deserved better than to be erased for someone else's agenda. She looked down at her hands, feminine hands with long, graceful fingers, so different from Kincaid's broad, calloused ones, yet now responding to her will as naturally as if they'd always been hers. But regret being alive again? No. There's still too much to do, too many wrongs to right. She turned to face Wexford directly. And flying that X-Wing feels like coming home, no matter what body I'm in. Wexford smiled, nodding in understanding. The squadron is already talking about you. They're calling you Ghost now, instead of Maverick. Seems fitting, under the circumstances. Maverick tested the name silently, feeling its resonance. Ghost. A spirit returned from beyond, neither fully of the past nor entirely of the present. A fitting designation for someone who existed in the liminal space between death and life, between one identity and another. Ghost it is then, she decided. New body, new call sign, same mission. And what mission is that, Commander? Wexford asked. Maverick's expression hardened with resolve. To protect those who can't protect themselves, to stand against those who would sacrifice others for their own power or profit, and to ensure that what happened to me, to Calloway, never happens to anyone else without their full knowledge and consent. She glanced up at the sky where the X-Wing had soared earlier that day, demonstrating capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. There's a new kind of warfare coming, Admiral, one that blurs the lines between human and machine, between physical and digital, between life and death itself. Someone needs to define the rules of engagement before it's too late. Wexford considered her words, then extended his hand. I can't think of anyone better qualified, Ghost. Maverick accepted the handshake, the gesture sealing a new chapter in a life that had already transcended normal boundaries of existence. Ghostwing reports ready for duty, Admiral, she said, her voice carrying the confidence that had always been Maverick's hallmark, regardless of the form it took. Just point us in the right direction. As darkness fell completely over the carrier, Ghostwing's pilots gathered in the ready room, preparing for their first official briefing under their resurrected commander. The atmosphere was charged with a strange mixture of reverence and camaraderie. These men and women were now part of something unprecedented, a unit led by a commander who had literally returned from death through technology that most of them could barely comprehend. When Maverick entered, they rose as one, their respect evident in every face. She studied them for a moment, seeing not just their current selves, but the potential of what this unit could become. Guardians at the threshold of a new era, ensuring that humanity's latest technological leap didn't come at the cost of its soul. At ease, she said, moving to the front of the room. We have a lot to discuss, and not much time. The world is changing faster than most people realize, and we're going to be on the front lines of that change. As she began outlining their first mission, investigating a suspected black site where Project Lazarus research might have continued under different auspices, Maverick felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had known in either of her lives. The Admiral had been right. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. A second chance, not just for one pilot, but perhaps for the very nature of what it meant to serve, to sacrifice, and ultimately, to return when duty called. Ghostwing was rising, and nothing would ever be the same again. Have you ever felt like you were given a second chance at life? A moment to redefine who you are beyond the limitations others placed on you? Ghost's journey reminds us that identity lives in our actions and choices, not just in our appearance or what others expect of us. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more stories about transformation and redemption. Share in the comments a time when you had to reinvent yourself or stand up for who you truly are, even when no one else believed it was possible.